You've tuned into Radio Northern Beaches. We live stream on rnb.org.au across the northern beaches of New South Wales, Australia and all over the world. You can also catch us local on 88.7 and 90.3 FM. Our podcasts are available at your convenience at rnb.org.au or rnbpodcast.com. So you and your friends don't miss any episodes. Don't forget to follow and share. Now here's our latest podcast.
Welcome again, listeners to Community Radio Northern Beaches, 88.7 and 90.3 FM, and streaming live. Website www.rnb.org.au. I'm Michael Lester and our program's Community Voices, and we're delighted once again to welcome back to Bonita Mersiades, and particularly each year it's such a pleasure to chat with Bonita about the Manly Writers Festival coming up this year on Thursday the 19th of March and Sunday the 22nd of March in Manly, of course, at a number of venues. And Bonita, as we know from previous discussions, is the founder of the Manly Writers Festival, a hugely successful community-based event full of challenging books, ideas, writing, authors and issues. Bonita is also, of course, herself, as well as the founder and director of the event, herself a writer and a publisher of Fair Play Publishing books. So, Bonita, it's a pleasure to welcome you back again. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Michael.
Bonita, these are very fractious times that we live in generally, with freedom of speech and hate speech and the whole controversy around the Adelaide Writers Festival and issues to do with who speaks about what and where. I'm just wondering, in putting together this incredible event this year, whether in any sense you've been caught up in any way in that sort of climate of fractiousness in trying to put this event together.
In a sense, I guess it's there, yes, the fractiousness, and you're aware of it all the time, unfortunately. But in a sense, in terms of putting together a writers' festival, you almost rise above it, because I very strongly believe that what writers' festivals are about is listening to people and learning about different ideas, and particularly in those areas which are contested, and we're really talking about geopolitics more than anything else, I guess, that we do listen to people and do learn about other perspectives, and it might not change a mind, but it might help in understanding. So, in that regard, I have deliberately tried to put different perspectives on this program. And as I think I said in the covering note when we release the program, there will be voices that not everyone is going to agree with. And that's life. We don't agree with anyone. And I think if we can't have a writers' festival that has diverse opinions, diverse views, and not listen to them with respect, then to me, that's what a writers' festival is all about. And that's what we're trying to do, is to bring the big ideas and the different ideas and also great storytelling to the Manly Writers Festival.
Well, indeed, and you do that each year, and this year it seems you've even excelled and surpassed your own previous incredible achievements in putting together such a huge and diverse range of people, ideas, as you say, addressing different issues, different genres, fiction and non-fiction. I think this event looks to me like it's a bigger scale event than anything you've even put together before, and they've been pretty large. What have you got, something over 6 writers and presenters, have you, or...?
Over 90, actually.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
Poor counting on my part.
Yeah, that's including basically authors and presenters, and then probably about another 20 to 30 people, 20 different people involved as hosts of different sessions as well. And what we've done, I think one of the different things that we've done this year in putting it together is to help people navigate their way around it, is put all of those sessions into pathways. So we've linked particular sessions by theme and subject area, so it gives people an idea, because everyone has different interests. Some people love only fiction and they're not interested in non-fiction, or they're interested in geopolitics but they're not interested in true crime. So all of those things have been sort of worked out for people to help them navigate their way around the program.
Well, it certainly is a lovely challenge trying to navigate through the program for anyone interested, as many people are in so many of the books and topics that you've presented. It always seems like you have to make really hard choices about what to go to and what not to go to. How do these pathways exactly work? Because I think you do have a number of themes going. Is the idea of themes different to pathways, and how are the pathways defined for the user?
Oh, I think I would use those two terms interchangeably. I mean, a pathway is a theme. And look, the seven themes or pathways that we have is Australia in the world, country and who we are, living today. So issues around housing and money and faith, personal reckonings, which is a lot of memoirs in that particular area, power, truth, and accountability. A section on so you want to be a writer, so that's practical workshops and things like that. And last but not least, stories and storytellers, so the fiction sessions.
That is very helpful, in fact. You've mentioned that in addition to the writers themselves, you've got some, I think, 2025 hosts for different sessions, although I think some of these hosts also appear in other sessions as writers in themselves. What is the role of the host, and how do you make the selection? What's the significance for the role of a host in the way you organise these events?
Well, the role of the host really depends on the session and how it's going to be run. And from my perspective, as the person who puts the program together, I'm not prescriptive to the host on what they do or of course, or what questions they ask, but certainly in terms of the type of session. So, for example, we have a session on the Saturday morning, which is Ask Us Anything from manuscript to bookstore, which are people who are expert in the publishing industry and can talk about what it takes to have an idea for a book, actually write it, and then get it and end up in a bookshop. That is more just an interactive session between those who attend and want to find out about that and those who are able to help in terms of publishing industry. You have something else which say is a one-on-one with Greg Sheridan or Bob Carr on, in Greg Sheridan's case, about faith and religion, and in Bob Carr's place a case about the book he has written about his life with his late wife. And they are much more intimate one-on-one conversations in which the host plays a significant role in that they're guiding that conversation. But one of the things that we do say to all our hosts is that we want to give the audience members the opportunity to ask questions also. Because people go to these sessions because they're interested in the topics and they will have questions. And so that's one of the things that we like to do. And in a session which takes, say, an hour, there will be time set aside within that hour for audience questions.
That's always been a good feature, I think, of your previous festivals. I'm sure it will be this time, the opportunity for members of the audience to engage and participate, not just to sit there and hear people, which of course they love to do, but it does get that engagement, doesn't it, going, that is so important to the sort of people who like to come along to these events.
Yes, it is. And how the second part of your question was how do we choose them, the hosts? For a number of reasons. I mean, as you rightly pointed out, there are some people who are hosts who are also on the program as authors. And, from my perspective, from a purely budgetary perspective, if we've got people already on the program who are journalists, for example, and who are used to being interlocutors for these types of sessions, then it's silly not to utilize them. For other sessions, we have people who have specific interests or skills or knowledge in those areas. And one example for is Geraldine Doogue, for example. I mean, she's I guess a doyen of journalism. At the moment, her most significant program is Global Roaming each day on the ABC. So she's hosting one of the sessions in terms of geopolitics. We have another person Alice Fraser, who is a writer and a comedian, and she's hosting a couple of sessions, one on romance fiction because she's written one herself, but that's going to be a very differently run session. And then another one on the Saturday evening, and I haven't mentioned this yet, but we have a really innovative program, I think, on the Saturday evening of looking at human creativity versus AI. And Alice is going to be taking a significant role in that as host as well.
As I say, it's quite mind-bending. You mentioned there Geraldine Doogue and the role she has in the geopolitics issues with her program. Now, that's one of your themes, Australia and the world and geopolitics. How have you structured that? I believe you've got a former diplomat there too, have you? And I think Ian Kemish and Michael Pembroke giving a bigger historical perspective, is it? Or
Yes, we've got four sessions in Australia in the world, and three of those are part of a geopolitics at Manly subsection. One of the things we found from the first 2 years that one of the most popular sessions that we have has been the one on geopolitics. So there are so many good and new books out in the past year since our previous festival that I've sort of said yes to all of them and then divided it into three. And we've got three sessions. One is on frontlines, conflict capture and the human cost of state power, with Mike Amor, who has been a foreign correspondent for the Seven Network for 30 years. So he's got some fascinating perspectives. And of course, Kylie Moore Gilbert, who I expect is a very well-known name to people who are listening to this program. She's an academic, but was also in an Iranian jail for 800 plus days. We've got a session on the diplomat. For those of you who've been watching the TV show, we haven't actually got that woman, but we have four men who have been diplomats in their various ways. Is an ex-foreign minister with Bob Carr, but three have been ambassadors and or high commissioners. Their experience in the diplomatic service covers the Pacific, Asia, the subcontinent, the Middle East, and Europe. So it'll be a fantastic discussion. And then last but not least, the World on Edge, Australia in the New Global Disorder, which includes Michael Pembroke, as you mentioned, Greg Sheridan, Peter Harcher, and Professor Clinton Fernandez. Now, that should be a fascinating discussion because those four men don't necessarily agree on anything in terms of geopolitics. I think there's anyone who's interested in geopolitics, it's a great afternoon on the Saturday with those three sessions.
yeah, our guest here on Community Voices Radio Northern Beach is Bonita Mersiades, the founder and director that puts together the annual astounding event here for our local community, the Manly Riders Festival this year from Thursday over 4 days, Thursday the 19th of March through Sunday the 22nd of March, with, as we say, just an incredible feast of offerings of diverse talent and opinion and views. You've got a lot of big names, many of which you've been mentioning, and many more that you haven't yet mentioned. But one of the features of the way you organise this is to give accessibility to the event for local, perhaps upcoming and not as well-known authors. What sort of a selection have you been able to get together for us this year?
In terms of local authors, we have 16. They include obviously household names such as Thomas Keneally, who is giving the Thomas Keneally oration on the opening day, as well as people who are just publishing their first book. We also have a couple of young adult authors, which I'm really happy to include them. And we've included them both in the schools program on the Friday, which is being held at McKellar Girls High School, but is open to years 9 and 10 students for any school across the Northern Beaches. And we also have a special young adult fiction session, which is free. It's not necessarily just for a young adult audience, but just to hear about how those three young people who have written books about some of the real life things that they encounter and they've put it into novel form. I think any parent who's got people of that age, it would be an interesting session to listen to, I think, from the perspective of young people themselves, translating that into a book form and writing about the issues that affect them and impact them. And there's a related session to that too. There's one which I care very deeply about, being the mother of sons myself, although grown-up ones, on boys and masculinity and the types of issues that we are dealing with as a society. And the pressures that they're coming across through social media and influences and not positive influences. And there's a very good panel on that with three people who are living those issues, both from a research perspective, from a young male perspective, and from a woman who's written a fiction book, but one that is very much based on real life studies and examples of the types of pressures that boys are under at the moment and the impact that's having on their education and all sorts of things.
Bonita, how can listeners get across your full program? What's the ticketing arrangements, both pricing structures, and where can they do all this? On your website or what?
Yes, the ticketing structure ranges. We do have a concession price and a under 25 price, although we're having issues with implementing that. But so if people want that, just contact us. But if you go to the website manlyridersfestival.org.au, there are links on every page to tickets. How to get across the program, I would go straight to where we say view the program on the front on the homepage of the website. And you can look at it session by session, or you can download a PDF of the program. And if you were to read every word in that PDF, you would have a really good, and which obviously, Michael, you have, you
I
would have a very
tried.
good you would have a very good understanding of the program. But otherwise, we have tried to, in the website, under the subsection, the festival, we have explained the program, the pathways, the authors, the hosts, the school program, and the venues. So every bit of information you could possibly want is there. And then there are links to the ticketing website, which is powered by Humanitics.
You mentioned the venues, and you've also mentioned, I think, that the scale this year is even bigger than ever, perhaps by design or just the way it's turned out. But I'm wondering about the venues in particular, given the increase in scale. You've always had a number of sort of venues, although a core venue. Have you broadened the number of venues, and if so, to what places and why and where?
Well, I've wanted to get away from having a core venue because even though it was a lovely venue, it was a bit, well, one, we couldn't be there on the Sunday ever. We always had to move out on Friday night and move back in Saturday, and then we had to move out Saturday and couldn't be there Sunday. So one, there was that sort of logistical issue, but two, it was just a bit corporatey. I thought Manly's got some interesting spaces and interesting places, so we've tapped into them. So you can attend a session in a wine bar at Henry G's, or you can go to the Manly Youth Centre or the Life Saving Club, or we even are using a yoga studio for some of our sessions upstairs off the Corso, the Sky Theatre, which is the Manly Theatre Group, and the Manly Club. So really we're saying it's stories across Manly. The festival is walkable, except for a couple of sessions on the Friday evening. There's 30 minutes between each session if you wanted to keep going throughout the day. And we also have the Belgrave Cartel as the festival cafe, and they're going to have book themed coffee for the 4 days of, or the three and a bit days of the festival. And we'll have if you're really lost in all of that, there's a festival hub and bookshop which will be at the Manly Library Community Room. So if you're walking past and think, well, where do I go next? Um, you can go in and ask.
Well, isn't that wonderful? I mean, to reflect the incredible diversity that we've discussed of the sort of programming you've got with people and issues and what have you. You've got now got this wonderful diversity of venues, which I think really does tie it into the community-based nature of your event, which is you're an independent festival, aren't you? And it's all volunteer run. So it's very much a community-based event, isn't it? Now reflected in these very diverse local venues.
Yes, it is very much a community run event. We are all volunteers. I sometimes don't know how we get the time to do it, but yeah, and that was part of it. I think one of the beauties of being independent and being community run is we're not going to run into problems like they did, for instance, at Adelaide Writers Festival because of some of the people who may or may not be on the program that some people may or may not like. And I think that also probably reflects the people of the community that we are diverse ourselves, we're tolerant, and we're happy to learn and happy to listen.
Bonita, as we move to wrap up here, we could talk forever, but I just encourage listeners to dip into your program on your website that you've mentioned, manlyridersfestival.org.au, to find out what's a feast of stuff that's available and how you can get along. But maybe we might just whet the appetite a little bit more in the remaining couple of minutes if we have a word about a couple of the other themes, maybe. I think you've mentioned a theme about country and who we are. What's the concept here and what have you put together there?
Well, this is about sort of place and history and culture and things like that. It is looking at a number of sessions that based around Australia and people who have written about country. So there are quite a few things in there which are of interest. Country and Who We Are is about sessions that explore place and history and culture and how and inheritance and how we can be shaped by that identity. So we have in there, I guess one of the first sessions we have is on the Friday, and it's two people who have written books that are about how we have a moral obligation across generations to get stories right. They're very different books, and we have a very good host there who, Summer Land, I'm not making that name up, that is her name. And I know that that will be quite a fascinating discussion because it's about connecting place and identity. On the Friday evening at the Manly Art Gallery, and I didn't mention that as a venue, but Manly Art Gallery is also in the mix, we have an author who's written a book about Lloyd Rees, the artist, and the
Yeah.
city he wants to see because, of course, he was very famous in painting Sydney and bringing Sydney to life through art. And then the other couple of sessions in that pathway are also about land and identity and who gets to belong. One very fascinating book around a Black American man who's come to Australia to live and talks about how he, as a Black American, how he has encountered racism. And then another one around inheritance and survival and belonging and different types of migrant stories. So again, some people will say, I don't want to hear these stories or I don't need to. Well, that's fine, don't come. But they are absolutely fascinating stories that I think are worth listening to and, hopefully even worth learning from.
Well, indeed they are, and a wonderful diversity there. I think you have a very successful and upcoming young writer. Is it Michael Ahmed?
Yes, Michael is in one of the other sessions,
Ah,
one of the other pathways, but he is a great writer and he is on the Friday as well, if I'm not mistaken. So yes, he's also in the area in the theme on power, truth, and accountability. And his session is Speaking the Unspoken, which is about child sexual abuse.
talking about that theme, let's spend a moment on that one quickly before we run right out of time. Power, truth, and accountability. Now, what a range of topics and issues so real to and current these days to address here. You've got some very interesting perspectives on that too, haven't you?
Yes, ranges from gender and gender in the workplace and gender in different forms through history and through sports workplaces and journalism, through Indigenous issues and the wonderful book, The Australian Wars, with the one of the principal co-writers of that. Another one with two very well-known writers, Professor Martin Thomas and Nadia Wheatley, on what happens when we try to culturally appropriate history, I guess, and that's what sort of binds those two books together. There's Michael, as you mentioned, or Muhammad Ahmad with Speaking the Unspoken. And then we have a festival conversation and book launch with J.S. Aleph, who has written a book called Betrayal, which is also about child sexual abuse and his personal story, not related to child sexual abuse of him, but his personal story being, I guess, inadvertently or drawn into these issues. And then rounding out that theme is Democracy Under Pressure, which is a civic briefing with an AI expert who is looking at, he's studying the impact of AI and algorithms on the democratic process, and Amy Remenkis, who is well known for these issues. And last but not least, it's called Power, Paranoia, and Pleasure, and it's a book that's been around for a little while about Stalin's wine cellar, Last Wine Cellar, and it's not just a book about wine; it's a book about Stalinist history and what the lengths he went to acquire some very valuable wine and what he did to hide it. It's a really rollicking read, and we have the ghostwriter of that book, and it rounds out what is a very powerful theme or pathway through the festival program.
And as we
Yep.
close off here on Community Voices Radio Northern Beaches with Bonita Mersiades, the founder and director of the Manly Riders Festival that's on this year, 2026, around many venues as we've discussed in Manly, all walkable distances, Thursday 19 March through Sunday 22nd March. Do go along and check this all out. As we wrap up, I notice you've got an inaugural oration by Thomas Keneally. What's the idea here of getting such an august writer to give an oration around the Manly Riders Festival?
Well, it came up in the context that I was aware that Thomas turned 90 last year,
Oh,
and he is really one of our cultural icons, literary icons, and
oh.
he is a Manly local. And I thought, well, one way I think of sort of setting up the festival each year is to have an oration, and who better to name it after than Thomas Keneally? Decades of storytelling, decades of advocacy, decades of social commentary. He has so much that we can learn from. And of course, if you're going to have a Thomas Keneally oration, the inaugural one, we are very fortunate to have Thomas Keneally give it.
Indeed
So
you are, and I guess it's all under wraps what ground he might choose to cover, even from you perhaps.
well, exactly. I mean, as a festival director, I wouldn't even dare to presume to ask him what he's going to talk about, because it is his oration, it's in his name, and he's giving it and been invited to give it. And of course, next year it'll be someone else. But whatever he has to say, I'm sure it'll be timely. And I'm sure it'll be relevant, and it'll be extraordinarily thoughtful as well.
Well, look, thank you very much, Bonita Mersiades, for joining us on Radio Northern Beaches to discuss this wonderful festival you put together once again this year, the Manly Riders Festival. I'm filled with excitement just contemplating the incredible range of people you've got and ideas that are going to be discussed and forums, and really looking forward to it. And I'm sure that our listeners too will turn up in the big sort of numbers that they've shown up in previous years. So thank you very much, Bonita, for joining us, and all the best with the festival.
That's a pleasure. Thank you so much, Michael.
Australia, the lucky country. We've got meat pies. We've got the world's best beer. But most importantly, top of the list, we've got Radio Northern Beaches 88.7, 90.3. Now hitting the entire world on www.rmb.org.au.